BattleBots is a well-known show that sees teams construct their own deadly robots and bring them to the arena to fight to the death. Robots come in all shapes and sizes, but not every applicant makes it onto the show. BattleBot's meticulous selection process attracts hundreds of builders, but after a series of technical drawings, interviews and renderings, only 50 to 60 are usually chosen for the show. This prevents robots that are too boring or simply too absurd to function from taking up valuable filming time and sponsorship money. With the 7th reboot season already upon us, I thought it would be a fun idea to look at some of the rejected designs which were on the more innovative and bizarre end of the scale. So let's start off with Horizon 250, which at first glance is a very novel looking design indeed, sporting two 30-pound spinners on either end of the long AR500 steel turret. What separates this robot from the bunch, however, is the way in which these spinners hit their opponent. By spinning these discs at the speed limit of 250 miles an hour, which is faster than a Formula 1 car, Horizon's turret is able to rotate in the opposite direction due to torque reaction, in accordance with Newton's third law. Now, had it been accepted, Horizon 250 could have used this to avoid the dangerous, well-armoured fronts of its opponents, and instead target the more vulnerable sides. In fact, the team's 12-pound robot Skyline has used this to great effect previously. The rotating turret also increases the amount of bite, or engagement the spinners get with their enemy, by increasing the speed at which they are fed into the opponent. So even though it has two smaller spinners, it can still pack a big punch. Sadly, Horizon 250 was rejected from the 2021 season, which is a shame because it puts an interesting twist on a fairly classic weapon, the horizontal spinner. It would have also made use of the same tried and tested wheels as BattleBots All-Star Tantrum and the same weapon motors as fan favourite Hypershock. But the story of Horizon 250 is by no means over. In fact, it's just beginning. A heavily upgraded version of the concept, known as Horizon 2022 for obvious reasons, is set to appear in the upcoming edition of the show. As we can see in this footage, Horizon 2022 makes use of the same weapon concept, but contains several visible upgrades, such as the self-righting component on top. Combine this with a team full of experience, and we could have a contender on our hands. Now we make our way to the United Kingdom, where we can find Broadside. Now, Broadside is a bit of a rarity in robot combat, because had it been accepted into the 2021 season, it would have wielded a cannon capable of firing 3 to 5 metal slugs straight into the faces of its opponents at up to 250 miles an hour. Projectile weaponry has always been put under heavy safety restrictions by BattleBots. In the original run of the show, they were banned altogether. As a result, only 1 or 2 such robots have ever featured on the reboot of the show, the most notable of which is Double Jeopardy. As to be expected, it's always had limited success. Unlike other weapon types such as spinners and axes and flippers, which teams have been refining and improving for decades, projectiles are still finding their place in the arena, which may have explained BattleBot's hesitation at accepting Broadside. It is a neat and tidy design, but it only has these forks to defend itself when it runs out of ammo, which doesn't make for great television. However, the team has reapplied for the upcoming season with a host of new upgrades. Instead of heading straight towards an opponent, Broadside can now drive alongside it and fire the cannon, which helps it live up to its nautical name. ARC Robotics has also opted to include an axe, which I believe could be used to bring the robot from the defensive corner into the offensive. Overall, I think these upgrades are a good response to the original rejection, because they allow Broadside to further the development of projectile weapons, but also allow it to put on a good show for 3 minutes when it runs out of ammo. We are now going to dive below the surface of the iceberg and take a look at a couple of robots which aren't quite as well known. You're not going to want to miss this one. Next up we have Acme Drill, or Acme Pilot Drill as it's sometimes known. It's different. Yep, Acme Pilot Drill is a robot which was rejected in 2016, in a slightly different way to the rest. I was fortunate enough to receive a response from the builder regarding the whole situation on my previous video. As you can see, it's a cylindrical looking robot armed with a drill on one end and a flywheel on the other. It also has tracks as well, just to further the madness. This guy on the top, that's Wile E. Coyote. He's a classic cartoon character from back in the day. Acme is a kind of fictional corporation that produces a bunch of weird weapons for this coyote as he tries in vain to catch the Roadrunner. However, they always tend to fail catastrophically. So, great start for this robot. It's very, very, very rare to see a drill in robot combat these days. In order to use one, you have to pin a robot in one position, and then try and drill through what's quite often hardened steel or titanium. Not an easy task, especially when the thing that you're trying to pin down is also trying to kill you. We can see a video of the robot being tested here with an unsharpened drill. Now, Acme Drill was accepted into the show originally, but upon arriving at the venue, it all went downhill. The team, for whatever reason, were involved in an argument with the security guard about trespassing at the venue, which was being rented out to BattleBots by Boeing. This escalated and ended up in the team being removed from the venue. To make matters worse, Boeing allegedly contacted Greg Munson, one of the owners of the show, and threatened to shut down production if Acme Drill's leader was allowed to compete. The builder also stated that some critical parts for the robot were stolen overnight from his truck, as if things weren't bad enough already. The community has always been a bit hesitant to accept this explanation for some reason, but I think having an argument and then a subsequent theft would be pretty strange things to make up if you're trying to make a name for yourself in the community. Either way, Acme Drill is definitely a unique looking robot. How it would have held up against its opponents using only a drill, I'm not sure, but the power leap that's occurred in the last 6 years would require all of its internal hardware to be updated quite a bit. The egg shape is useful for self-righting, but it's quite flat at the front, and especially with tracks at the sides, you need some kind of way of deflecting spinners, especially given how prevalent they've become recently in the sport. It's also worth noting that Acme Drill applied for the Chinese combat show King of Bots, which has since run into severe financial problems. And so Coyote's hunt for the elusive Roadrunner carries on. Moving on, we have Black Scorpion, the robot from the thumbnail. That's right, it wasn't clickbait. This is an actual, very theatrical looking design, which was submitted to BattleBots in 2016 by Team Creative Anarchy. It is a tombstone-shaped, two-wheel drive chassis armed with a long scorpion tail or segmented hammer, powered by a single E-Tech motor and a custom spring block. The builder very kindly took the time to leave us an explanation as to how the whole thing worked. He said that the later iterations of the design included a hammer that was more stout and less likely to be damaged by spinners and such. He also pointed out that it's not apparent in this picture. When retracted, the weapon starts rolled up in the rear and each segment bends in unison with the head, having a total arc of 600 degrees. So it's a really intriguing concept there. He says, those are not pistons or actuators, the design uses direct metal linkages. The motor was supposed to be an E-Tech, but it was not going to be direct drive. The motor would apply energy to springs or a flywheel before being fired. When I first saw this design, I thought the weapon would extend slowly and try and control the opponent, but looking at the flat chassis shape and the explanation, it's geared a lot more towards a swift attack than control. The robot was ultimately rejected due to being submitted too late, but received a lot of attention from other builders. Here, Ray Billings of Tombstone fame points out that when you have a robot like this with a unique weapon, you need to demonstrate its effectiveness before they accept it for the show. Some teams, like Horizon earlier, do this at a smaller scale, but seeing as it was late, Black Scorpion wasn't able to do so. But the builder hasn't quite closed the door on the biomimicry concept just yet, and stated that if he did make a return to the sport, he would most likely trial it as a lightweight first. Personally, I hope he gives the robot another shot, because I'm guessing it's the reason that a lot of you clicked on this video. Unlike my terrible model of it in Robot Arena 2, it's theatrical, eye-catching, intimidating, something the show is lacking at the moment in my opinion. If you agree with me and would like to see Black Scorpion in action, even at the lightweight level, then feel free to leave some support down below, and perhaps one day we will, you never know. Next on our journey through the weird and wonderful world of rejected robots is the Cone Army. Now, the plan for the Cone Army was relatively simple. Enter 37 remote-controlled traffic cones into the most deadly robot fighting competition in the world and use them to try and swarm your opponent. 37 traffic cones. If we do the maths, the robot was supposed to weigh 220 pounds, and if each cone was identical, they would weigh less than 6 pounds each. I guess their opponents could get stuck on the remains of the fallen comrades as they were destroyed one by one, and that's assuming they managed to find 37 drivers, and that's assuming they managed to fit them in the team's very limited control booth area. In all seriousness, the concept of swarming an opponent with multiple smaller bots is something I feel hasn't been explored enough. Multiple teams have entered multi-bots of all kinds, but none of them seem to have really had much effect on the competition. I don't think part of the Sub-Zero team entering 37 defenseless, seemingly weaponless traffic cones would have quite the same effect as, say, a swarm of 10 undercutters that target the opponent's wheels from all angles. We actually have the footage of the sportsman robot that the Cone Army was based on. It's called VLC, and rather than 37 traffic cones, it's only got 2. Yeah, maybe it's for the best that the Cone Army never ended up fighting Tombstone. Moving on, we have Whammo. Now you may have heard of Slammo, the control bot from a few seasons ago, and Whammo comes from the same builder, Craig Danby. It was a small, compact robot with an assortment of horizontal spinning bars that could weigh anywhere between 60 to 77 pounds, so a good chunk of the robot's weight. I couldn't find a statistic of how fast they planned to spin these bars, but Whammo's predecessor Apex, which competed in Robot Wars in the United Kingdom, was able to spin its own bar at 242 miles an hour. This made for one of the most dramatic self-destructions in the history of robot combat. As you can see, it's very, very scary stuff, especially if you're a BattleBots producer concerned about containing that within your very expensive arena. Team Danby stated in the interview after the fight that they weren't going to try and build something that chaotic again, and so Whammo understandably featured a smaller bar spinner at a presumably lower top speed. However, it appears the damage to its reputation was already done. Whammo was rejected and the team competed only with Slammo in the 2020 season. A lack of sponsorship prevented the team from re-entering Whammo again the following year. However, not all hope is lost, as Whammo, now reverting to the name Apex, is reapplying for the upcoming season, this time with a notably different chassis and omni-wheels that allow it to move in all different directions. Even if it is toned down slightly, a bar spinner of that magnitude should not be taken lightly, and I wouldn't be surprised to see it cause some real chaos if it got accepted. Now the next robot I have actually had the pleasure of seeing fight in real life. It is Two-Headed Death Flamingo, and it is exactly what it says on the tin. It is a two-wheel drive mild steel chassis covered in high-density polyethylene, and its weaponry consists of two flamingo heads that repeatedly pummel its opponents until they die. Apparently the statistic is 6 pecks per second, which is pretty scary. It also has these massive kind of 3D rotating wings on either side, which make it very, very annoying to push around and get a hold of. This was the fight that I witnessed personally in 2018, and this was the version of the robot rejected from the show initially. As hilarious as it would have been to see a flamingo flailing about the arena, frustrating everything that tried to kill it, the flamingo heads didn't really have the offensive capabilities that BattleBots was looking for, and so the most recent version of Two-Headed Death Flamingo also featured a flamethrower, a revamped wedge shape, and a set of saw blades that could be interchanged with the flamingo heads. Sadly, the Flamingo's updates were still not to be tested in the arena, as the robot was rejected for a second time, and even if it had been accepted, travelling from the UK to the US was made a lot more difficult by the pandemic, although a piece of it did cross the Atlantic and get signed by all the teams in the same shipping crate as Monsoon. I'll always remember seeing it being launched out of the arena in 2018, and the team handing out loads of stickers to everyone afterwards. They've got quite a big presence in the British robot combat scene, and they've even hosted a few events themselves. Next, we're paying a visit to Honest Abe, everyone's favourite president turned into a robot, alongside Donald Thump of course. At first glance, it seems like a rather ordinary shell spinner, similar to your Gigabyte or Shredderator, but the interesting part is contained within that top hat. Had it been accepted into the show, this top hat would have been one of the most innovative pieces of technology to ever grace the battle box. Rather than being driven around by a human being, Honest Abe was designed to maneuver around autonomously. Its 34 horsepower drive motors would operate under the control of a laser scanner that could measure the distance between the robot and its surroundings 5,400 times in a single second. These efforts would also be aided by the presence of onboard cameras. Autonomous combat robots are quite rare even nowadays. The most notable example is Chomp, which used its autonomy to great effect in 2016, taking out the reigning champion Byte Force in one perfect hit to its weapon chain. However, a full-body spinner such as Honest Abe carries a lot more kinetic energy than a pneumatic hammer. The nature of a full-body spinner also means that it's a lot harder to access the mandatory kill switch on the robot after each fight. Even though all autonomous functions on a law-abiding bot can be overridden, BattleBots deemed Honest Abe too much of a risk, and the robot was therefore rejected. However, elements of its team would go on to compete with Ghost Raptor in subsequent seasons. It's safe to say that BattleBots has the widest selection of flippers in the sport currently, ranging from traditional pneumatics to hydraulic and even flywheel-powered systems. Warthog would have been no exception to this. Having applied for the 2021 season, it boasted a set of tusks at the front, which would flip robots by pushing against the inertia of its own chassis, rather than the ground. This means that the robot would look reactionless, according to the team, as it flipped another robot over. It's quite hard to imagine and get your head around the concept just because of how unique it is, which I think might have played a part in its rejection. Before investing filming time in a robot with a new kind of primary weapon, BattleBots needs to know that the concept works on a smaller scale because heavyweight robots are expensive for everyone involved. Currently, I can't find more than a CAD model of Warthog, but it should be noted that when uniquely weapon robots such as Blip applied, they released a video of the mechanism they plan to use. Warthog could very well have done this too, but as far as I'm aware, it's not yet been shared publicly. Looking back at the chassis of the robot, we can see that it's quite light on armour towards the front, and with the prevalence of spinners in the sport right now, I could see that being quite a bit of a problem. It also has omni wheels which allow it to strafe in any kind of direction that it wants. Everything about the robot seems a little bit experimental. The flipping mechanism, the chassis shape, and even the mobility it uses. I think that Warthog is a shining example of, in order to prove its viability as a heavyweight robot, it would need to be scaled down first, in order to iron out the gremlins that will inevitably come with such a strange design. Finally, we're travelling down under to look at a very curious robot called Zap. As you can see, it's a wide, flat robot armed with two horizontal spinners, one on each side. But Zap's real secrets lie deep within the brain of the robot. The entire robot is supposed to spin around on the spot, which is quite deadly if you have two spinners on the outside. But BattleBots have to be aggressive and actively engage the opponent, so sitting and spinning on the spot isn't really going to cut it. To get around this, Zap utilises something known as multi-brain technology, which allows the robot to move around the arena and engage the opponent even while the entire thing is spinning. It does this by turning each drive motor on and off repeatedly for a split second, resulting in a process called translational drift. This means that any opponent facing Zap would have to deal with not only the kinetic energy stored in each of its little spinners, but also the kinetic energy stored in the entire robot as it spins around and translates towards them. This concept is extremely clever and fairly common in the lower weight classes. Ben Hayton, the designer of Zap, has himself been developing a beetle-weight dual-spinner multibrain and has several videos detailing the journey. Sadly, perhaps due to the rarity of multibrain spinners at the heavyweight level, Zap was rejected for the 2022 season, not for the first time. BattleBots has also greatly reduced the number of international teams in its World Championship, and we know at least one Australian spot is likely to be taken by Death Roll due to its prestige in the sport. I've heard rumours of a BattleBots live show being planned that has no selection committee or anything like that, it's just literally turn up and fight. So maybe that could be Zap's testing ground, because we'd love to see it in the arena soon. This has been quite a journey through the lesser known side of BattleBots. Thank you very much for watching if you stayed this far. I hope you enjoyed the video and I hope everyone kind of learned something new about the show, because I certainly did when I was researching for the video. I realise I have been quiet for more than a year. I do apologise for this. I've just been taking some time away. It does take a long time to make these videos, so I hope this one makes up for it anyway. And obviously I have to address as well, that last video of mine, it absolutely blew up. It's got about over 3 million views now, and it brought over 8,000 subscribers to the channel and counting. So welcome everyone, to all the new people if you've stayed this far. Wow, I'm blown away by the support that video got. To everyone who liked and commented, or even if you didn't do that and you just watched, I don't know what I did that made that video so special and so successful, but it's unbelievable, honestly. I'm still taking it in. So thank you everyone for watching, and I'll see you next time.